What's going on, everybody? Happy Taco Tuesday. Sam Shapiro back here with another episode of your Heat Latest right here on FanArc. We're going to dive into some trade proposal Tuesday talks that I thought would be interesting for Miami to maybe look into. Again, none of these three proposals I'm going to dive into right now have been set in stone, confirmed in any way, shape, or form by any major media outlets yet, but just some hypothetical scenarios I found floating around online that I thought could definitely be interesting to talk about and maybe would help bolster Miami on potentially both sides of the floor, depending on which player we're talking about. The first one we're going to dive into, CJ McCullum, the veteran guard now playing for the Washington Wizards, kind of has seen some, injury problems over the last, season or two. And it's just, I think despite that, he is a 20-point bucket. And I think that he would be a good addition to add to the cast now in Miami's backcourt with the addition of Tyler Herro and Norman Powell coming off a great season with the Clippers. One trade that I saw online from Fadeaway World included McCullum in a deal with Andrew Wiggins and Jaime Jaquez Jr. I definitely think Miami, if they were looking at anything where they wouldn't have to give up a whole lot too much, I definitely like including Jaquez. Not the biggest fan of Wiggins being involved in that trade, just because I think Wiggins, an NBA champion, clearly wants to stay in Miami right now. I don't know if that would be the best swap at this point in time. If it was just Wiggins for McCullum, that would definitely be worth looking into a more serious conversation, I think, because at the end of the day, Miami not really giving up a whole lot, kind of more of a veteran type player swap right there. But McCullum has a little bit more experience under his belt in terms of just the amount of seasons he's played in the league. So, and definitely has a little bit more of an expansive long game, I think, than Andrew Wiggins, even though Wiggins' athleticism kind of out-trumps McCullum in that regard. So you've got pros and cons with both players. I wouldn't be upset if, Miami didn't decide to go through with it, even if they did open the door on that conversation in some way, shape, or form. I think McCullum would be a good player to complement Miami's backcourt overall, really. So I definitely, in comparison to a lot of some of the other hypothetical trades I've seen over the last week or two, I think this one is pretty good because in the grand scheme of things, Miami's not really giving up a whole lot for a veteran guard. It's just if McCullum can stay healthy and kind of add to the win now mentality, that's really where this trade is going to be worth it. So drop in the comments if you think Miami maybe looking into a guard like McCullum could potentially help out or would be, worth Miami's time and assets. I really like this trade in particular because they're not really coughing up any draft capital. So in terms of what draft, picking the future of Miami, they're not really weighing anything that could pose of any risk there. But like I said, just an interesting trade. I thought that could be a potential decent option to help Miami's backcourt if the door on the opportunity of McCullum maybe even coming to the 305 were to seriously be looked at. But another trade that I thought was kind of interesting at this point in time was I know he just got, kind of dealt to Boston in the exchange for Drew Holiday to Portland, but Anthony Simons, I think Anthony Simons could definitely be a young guard that would also really bolster Miami's backcourt. I think he would complement the team very well. Also very athletic player that's got, in my opinion, a pretty deep bag, can score the ball from pretty much anywhere on the floor, great facilitator. And I'm not saying Miami should ever consider trading some of their young guards, but I could see him maybe going in a deal involving Pela Larson, or I don't want to say we should trade Yaku Chones yet because he hasn't really showed anything yet, or he hasn't, really proved himself as an NBA player. But I think I don't think it would necessarily be the worst thing in the world. Again, not saying we should go out and trade, all of our rookies and give up on developing a guy like Yaku Chones for a guy like Simons, who's kind of proven himself already. But I think if Miami was looking at any assets to potentially deal going forward, that would kind of have to be along the lines of what they would have to give up. Even in a deal like Pela Larson or Kashad Johnson, and then maybe even adding a guy like Myron Gardner, who's kind of on the table if he's really going to get a full-time deal at this point or not, could potentially be more worth it just because Simon's pretty established, player in the league already and definitely contributed to Portland in some of their darker days, I would say. So again, let me know in the comments if you think this proposal, or any proposal for Anthony Simons would be absolutely ridiculous for Miami to look into, or if it would be worth maybe looking at some of the backcourt or draft assets that Miami could offer for a guard like him. I definitely think it'd be an interesting conversation to look into, but I don't necessarily know if giving up Miami's youth would be worth it at this time in the grand scheme of things, especially because a lot of those guys still have a lot left they want to prove that I kind of mentioned before. And, I don't necessarily think it would be totally worth it. So just an interesting hypothetical I was thinking about. But another player that I thought would be interesting for Miami, particularly to look at, and this is also going to be kind of a, there might be a lot of people in the comments that are like, that maybe the possibility that could work, but Zion Williamson has been a very interesting topic in the grand scheme of things in terms of his professionalism, his conditioning, his injury, if he's been able to stay healthy. But the only reason I thought this was maybe had at least some substance in terms of helping Miami's front court, whenever Miami is banked on getting a superstar player, they've really kind of helped bolster their career to the next level. Two great examples of that, obviously LeBron James, but Jimmy Butler, I mean, when he first was looking to come to Miami, I mean, he was getting clowned on all of the, ESPN, for NBA Insider, all that kind of stuff. All those shows, really, all the analysts were kind of clowning him like, oh, go have fun in South Beach. We'll kind of just forget about you after this. You tried to, be a leader in Minnesota and Philadelphia, and it really didn't work out after the whole, you departing Chicago stint. So it was interesting. He went to Miami and he really made them a finals contender. And I don't think any Heat fan was expecting that when Miami first signed him. I'm not saying just because Jimmy Butler took his career to the next level means that Zion Williamson is going to, become an MVP caliber type player, which Jimmy Butler in the playoffs arguably was. But I just think that if Zion Williamson was going to be in a position where he could be pushed to really, one, condition himself, and two, hold himself accountable about being a professional superstar, Miami would be a decent environment for him to maybe look at that and maybe explore that option as well. In terms of the assets Miami would have to give up, I'm not entirely sure what they would be willing to give up. They should, obviously, I think Kel'el Ware, Bam Adebayo, Tyler Herro, untouchable pieces at this point in time right now. But superstar kind of player. The Pelicans don't really have a whole lot of depth at all to really build around, with the exception of him. So Miami would either have to give up a fortune really to pick him up, or would probably ultimately have to give up, at least 3 or 4 decent players if they weren't going to give up one of those 3 assets. I personally don't think that would be worth it in any way, shape, or form. I think that would be absolutely ridiculous, but drop in the comments if you think adding a superstar caliber type player like Zion would maybe help Miami in any way, shape, or form, whether it would just be bolstering the backcourt in general, or it would be able to help the former number 1 overall pick turn his career around and him kind of live up to the name that a lot of people believed he was going to be, the next LeBron James generational type player back around 2019, 2020. Haven't really seen signs of that. If anything, he kind of just has gotten out of shape, can't stay healthy, and now is having issues off the court that are really starting to snowball. So I'm not saying he would come to Miami and completely fix his life. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I definitely think that possibility wouldn't be completely out of the cards, and there would be, just saying it now, at least a 15-20% chance that he could, really turn his entire NBA career around if he were to go to a team like Miami. I could not say the same thing about a lot of other teams, because I don't think the type of culture or, Pat Riley, I don't think would tolerate a lot of the stuff he's been going through. And I think that if it didn't work out, he would kind of move on. But picking up a guy like Williamson, you'd kind of have to sign him to a pretty big, you'd have to give him a lot of money regardless, whether it was just 1 year, 3 years, or anywhere in the mix of that. So drop in the comments if you think that would, not just benefit Miami, but would also benefit rebolstering the former number 1 overall pick's career. And if that hypothetical wouldn't be such a bad scenario to let play out, at least in the future of the NBA. Now, moving over to Tyler Herro, he's got a little bit of time before he's going to be a free agent. He's still got some time on the $30 plus million contract he's on right now, but It's expected that in his next contract deal, he's going to be asking for more than $41 million. This was an article I saw from a source that I saw earlier today online, and I just think that it would be, if you ask me today, based on how Tyler Herro has played, is he deserving of a $42 million extension? Now, granted, he would be getting this at the start of the 27-28 NBA season. He's signed through 26-27. He's going to be making $31 million this season, 33 the following year. So then 27-28 be an unrestricted free agent, and it's expected he's going to ask for a deal $42 million. That's $10 million more, like I just said, than the deal he's making, roughly $10 million, than the deal I'm saying he's basically on right now. And granted, he's on the right trajectory to earn more money, just because now he's, this past season, first-time All-Star, boosting his career highs over the course of the few seasons he's been in the NBA so far, already winning Sixth Man of the Year, being one of the shining stars in, at least in the NBA bubble, when he was young and kind of getting used to the culture of the NBA in a very interesting scenario. But I just think that right now he is not worth $42 million. I don't. I really don't. And at least I just look, if he would be less of a liability on defense, I just think that I think if he was less of a liability on defense and he continues to improve on the trajectory he's moving offensively, I think one day he could be potentially worth $42 million a year. However, right now, even like $30 million a year, yes, I would agree, just because of how he's continued to offensively develop. Now he's kind of been one of the main, if not top two scorers on the team, if not, some would probably argue, say the biggest scorer on the team. Just the overall consistency we've seen from him during his time in the NBA has just defensively not been promising enough yet that you can pay this man $42 million a year. I think if he at least kind of becomes a little bit more consistent on those fronts, and I mean, because of how he was a liability last year, Miami really didn't make a whole lot of noise in the NBA playoffs from the grand scheme of things, getting swept by Cleveland. And then on top of that, just generally not being able to really stay healthy over kind of really the last year. It kind of seems like this has kind of been the last season or two. It's kind of seemed like we've seen him slightly be a little bit more consistently healthy than in seasons past, but I still don't think it's been enough to show that he's at that $42 million a year mark yet. I think if he continues to improve offensively and not defensively, maybe 35 a year could be a decent asking price, just because, face of the offense, making Miami an absolute threat, especially in the deep range game. But let me know in the comments if you think by the time Tyler's a free agent in the 27-28 NBA season, he would be worth $42 million a year. Personally, right now, if you ask me today if we should pay him that money, I'd say no. He's got a little bit more work to do. 35, I'd be a little bit more willing to explore that, but in the grand scheme of things, he's definitely got a little bit more work to do on the court before he's going to be making that much money, at least playing in the 305 or really anywhere. It's no guarantee he's going to, if he were to decide to go to another team, that he would be averaging roughly 24 points per game a night, and would also have the facilitating ability that he would, and would be able to command the offense in a way that he does every night. So again, drop in the comments what you think Tyler Herro's, worth is right now, and over the course of, maybe the next two seasons, if he continues to develop on the trajectory he's moving, what asking price would be realistic for him to ask for. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode of your Heat Latest here on FanArc. Don't forget to like this video and, of course, subscribe for all great daily content pertaining to the Miami Heat. Once again, thanks so much for joining us. I'm Sam Shapiro, and have a great Taco Tuesday, everybody.